that's the that way.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Warrior Dreaming podcast, a podcast all about finding people and finding their stories to share, people who have the warrior spirit and who have had dreams and have used their life journey to progress their dreams, to overcome many different things, and people who have got life experiences to share and a story that can empower people. I would like to begin by acknowledging and paying my respects to the traditional custodians of the land on which I am now based due to the current COVID situation. So I've moved back home to country, back on Barkindji / Latji Latji country, and I would like to acknowledge and pay my respects to elders, both past, present, and emerging. I acknowledge my mum, my grandmother, because without them I wouldn't be the woman I am today. And I also acknowledge my children, because without them I wouldn't be the woman that I am or be on this journey that I am. And my name is Chantal Thompson. I'm a proud Barkindji and Latji Woman, and formerly based in Melbourne pre-COVID virus, now currently based back home. Created a little space for myself at my dad's house, kind of taking over. You've got to make the best of the situation as it is. And I'm really excited today to be sharing with you the story and the warrior spirit of one of my favorite people in the world, who also happens to be my cousin, Bianca Hunt. Bianca, do you want to introduce yourself?
So I do. I just want to also acknowledge that I'm sitting on Dharawal land. So, and pay my respects to elders past, present, and emerging. So as Chantal was saying that my name is Bianca Hunt, so I'm a Gumbaynngirr woman, but I was raised on Barkindji land and accepted by the Barkindji community, so a little place called Broken Hill, and raised part of my life also in Majura. So as Chantal said, you know, my mum and her mum are sisters, and thank you so much. It's a privilege being here, being part of this.
No, look, I'm really excited to have you. And I guess for a little while, the Warrior Dreaming project and the vision that I have for this podcast and the whole vision behind the Warrior Dreaming movement, as I'd like to call it, had kind of gotten put to the wayside. But the last couple of weeks, I've really struggled to adapt to a new way of doing things, and I really had started to beat myself up because 2020 was going to be my year. I'd had a rough year in 2018, 2019, had some really big ups and downs, and I had some big plans for 2020, but I know so did a lot of the rest of humanity, and this wasn't anything that anyone kind of saw coming. And all I can say is I'm very grateful to be based in Australia, and as much as I have my opinions on our government and everything else, I think they've responded really well to the current state of things. And I thank Australians for staying home and doing the right thing. And because I think that's really helped us get ahead of the curve in the current situation. But also, being completely honest, it's been a really big adjustment, adjusting to, I was based in Melbourne. My children were based with their dad full-time back home on country. And I was in the middle of building my business, and I was on this journey towards striving for my black belt and wanting to work towards a new goal of being a black belt world champion and building my speaking business. Well, that all stopped. Our shut down. All my speaking events have been cancelled. So it's taken me a little while to grieve that process. And now I'm moving back home and not having kind of any space of my own. We're moving between my dad's house and my in-laws' house, so it's kids are on top of each other, the grandparents are on top of each other, and it's kind of getting used to having no space again. So today has kind of been the first kind of day that I've really gotten up and going, you know what, I'm going to slowly start to find my feet again and create some sort of routine. The kids go back to school next week, so it's all of us are finding our way with this and kind of just taking things a day at a time. And I think now more than ever, we need to hear people's stories and to see people who have faced hardship in their life and have used that hardship to overcome whatever is in front of them. And then they've used those lessons to progress not only their own life forward, but their vision for their life and for their communities or the world as they see it. And for me, the warrior within is not about fighting. It's not about what you see in the movies or what people might depict as being a warrior, someone who's always big, strong and fierce. Like, that's an aspect of it. And fighting for what you believe in or fighting for justice or what is right is also an aspect of it. But for me, the definition of a warrior is someone who stands up for those who are vulnerable, who stands up for those who don't have a voice, and also being the elderly, being young children, whatever it is, it's about doing the right thing and trying to use their own skills and their own voice and their own capacity to make a difference in the world and to, I guess, be the change that they want to see in the world. So, and it's not necessarily that you always get it right. It's people we all fall over, but a lot of the time our life is determined by how many times we get back up again and what we learn from those lessons. So, Bianca, I'd be really interested to hear your definition of what you think a warrior is.
So, you know, when I've been watching your journey, you know, over the years, and I like how, you know, you mentioned about, you know, when you fall down, you know, that journey of getting back up and what that looks like and that resilience within that space. When I think of the word warrior, I do think of the person that's, you know, has to fight. What that fighting looks like is, you know, varies completely. And, you know, within your space, you literally, you know, fight. You know, you've represented Australia and, you know, definitely dominate within that area as well. So you know, take the theoretical side of it as well as the physical side. But it is like we come from ancestors that have been through a lot, you know, even my mother, her journey as well. And now I'm in that space and, you know, just, you know, overcoming the challenges that we do. And that's even today with, you know, our current situation and, you know, how do we handle them changes and how not only internally, but also within our community and within our family. So, look, I understand going back to country. My children's father is a Barkindji man, and, you know, I've sent them back to country to, you know, see him and see the family on that side as well. So, you know, sometimes going back country can ground you as well, and it allows you to refill that cup, so then you can tackle all the changes that are going on and, you know, just shine in your space. So that would be my definition of being a warrior.
Yeah, no, look, thank you for that. Yeah, I think you're right. It is about fighting, but a lot of time when people haven't had to, I guess they haven't had to get up and fight a lot, or they don't see themselves as being a warrior as such, particularly in a modern day 21st century kind of concept, whereas we come from the oldest living culture in the world, the oldest continuous culture as well. And what I really struggle with is that we have rock paintings that are 60,000 years old, and we're still continuously having to justify our space and the value of our culture. And I feel that there's so much untapped potential in our culture to learn from, particularly with the current situations that we face. I mean, we're resilient, we're adaptable, we know how to adapt to our environment, whereas I think Western culture is used to forcing itself on its environment. It's used to, it teaches people to be dominant and go after what you love, and you shape your environment and don't stop. Whereas within our culture, it's about looking at the environment and going, okay, what do I need to do to adapt to the environment? What resources are within my reach, and how can I be innovative? And I've always had, I'll go, yep.
And part of that is also due to colonization, because our ancestors had to learn to adapt to the situation that they faced. And through that, like, we have so much internal skills, and, you know, they say, you know, trauma changes us on a biological level, but it also allows us to become stronger. There's the situations that we've faced, we can use that power of our ancestors and, you know, our current situations and challenges that we've dealt with throughout life, to use them internal skills to tackle this. and some people don't actually have that because they've been privileged enough and also, grateful, that they haven't had to deal with as many challenges, but, reframing that, we're on a good footing with dealing with change.
Yeah, no, I think that's an excellent point. And we have a blueprint for how to overcome and how to adapt, but also how to prepare ourselves to strengthen ourselves within adversity and circumstances that are really a lot beyond our control. And it's about doing the best you can with what you have in front of you. And for those of us, the minority within the minority, I would say, because within current modern day Australia, a lot of our communities still struggle with the impacts of colonisation and the impacts of that trauma in terms of, so we make up only 3% of the population, but within that 3%, probably less than 0.2% are thriving in terms of having overcome a lot of the hardships, and we're carrying or trying to move forward the rest of our community and bring them with us, those that are still struggling or those that are still heavily weighed down by that trauma and haven't found their footing in being able to hold that trauma whilst also still striving and making new pathways. I mean, particularly I know with your story, you've broken the cycle, you've gone through school, you've now got children that have graduated year 12, and I'd really like you to share whatever you're comfortable with sharing about breaking cycles and being the first to do something different, because I think sometimes that can be really hard space for people to be the first to do something different that goes against the norms of what they've been given.
So yeah, I think, and the thing that I've also, was challenging was my age. I was 14 when I fell pregnant with my eldest daughter, and we're in our family, we've had teen parenting, for generations, for as long as I can remember. And some in society, in Western society, that was a normal thing at one stage for mums to be teen parents. So I was raised in a world where it was starting to shift, and women were actually starting to get more a right to have an education and a right to live in this world without following the stereotypical view of what a woman was. So having the babies, finding that relationship, and getting married. And I was very much raised with that frame of mind. And while I didn't intend to become a teen parent, I did, and I knew that education was extremely important, not just for myself, but also for my children, to give them the best opportunities possible. So I was also fortunate enough because, 2 generations before, and maybe even one generation before, attending school while pregnant was not something you did. And girls were pulled out of school and even shamed, and children were secretly given to family to raise. So I was raised, I fell pregnant with Kayam at a time that the school allowed me to stay there. And we look at domestic violence and isolation, especially at this time, and the impacts of that. So being a teen, falling pregnant, being, actually loving getting an education, like dealing with the normal struggles of, schooling, but I understood the value of education. So the school allowing me to stay there, I was still surrounded by my peers. I was progressing towards my future with whatever that looked like, and it was challenging. And also, like, there were times I was in a domestic violence situation, and without them protective factors around me, I may have not been able to move out of that space. So, but women before me didn't even get the chance to have them opportunities. So I'm also grateful for that, even though I was, it was tough. But, and then, so then in year 12, being me and, sometimes making life harder for myself, I fell pregnant with my second child. And, she's 18 now, and she's just finished year 12. And as Chantel was saying, I've my eldest daughter's finished year 12 as well. And so I was actually able to, I gave birth to Harmony, and then 2 weeks later I sat my HSC, my exam. So that was an interesting time. And when you're in that space, like, it's tough. You're like, you know, you're thinking, okay, what's this going to look like? Can I do this? Am I capable of doing this? And with my second child, I was living by myself, and you know, I didn't have a car, and I was walking to school and dropping the kids off to like family daycare, and then, you know, getting myself to school. And I didn't have that that family support that a lot of people are actually missing right now, because they're at home being isolated. So, you know, but, you know, even with all the confusion and just everyday life, because life doesn't stop, you know, I just kept trying to put one foot in front of the other. I had this end goal. Okay, I want to finish school. What that looks like, I have no idea. But, you know, if I keep turning up, then hopefully I can get to the other side. So, and I've kind of used that strategy my whole life. You know, whenever I'm faced with challenges, I think, what can I do? You know, what's within my control? And, you know, one of the next time that this feeling of helplessness come around, and I still clearly remember it, was when we were losing so many people within Mildura and surrounding areas to suicide, and young people, and I just couldn't understand it. And I'd moved to Wollongong by this time, and, you know, all these young kids that were suiciding, like, I remember seeing them when they were, you know, 5-6 years old, and it hurt. I was like, what can I do? This is an Australian issue, not, you know, but for Indigenous people, they're twice as likely to die by suicide, and it's the leading cause of death. So, and, you know, I felt, you know, and I had to deal with, when I was 16, the father of my first child actually tried to suicide. So I had to deal with that as well as a 16-year-old. And then later in my 20s, that, you know, that come up with our young people. So I was like, what can I was still carrying trauma from when I was 16. You know, I had them beliefs of, how could you suicide when you've got children, you know, and all this stuff like this. This was some of the stuff that I was carrying. And then it started happening, and then I realized, you know, we're losing so many people, and I wanted to understand why. I wanted to become more informed. So I decided I was going to volunteer at Lifeline for the Crisis Support Service, and that was in 2015. At the same time, I was getting back into my schooling again. So when I moved up here, I, you know, just wanted to get the kids settled. I've been working since I was 12 years old, and I worked right up until I had my 5th child. So I worked in home and community care, aged disability within Mildura, and then when I come up here, it was about getting the kids settled, and then moving back and, you know, upskilling. And so I started doing my diploma of counselling and my Cert 4 in community services, and then decided I was going to volunteer at Lifeline as well and raise my 5 kids. So at the time, my youngest was 4. She'd just started preschool, and my eldest would have been about 15, 16 years old. So, and, you know, I'm still volunteering for the crisis service today, and I now get the opportunity to go out into communities and have the discussion around suicide and support communities with, you know, what's been going on. So I go to rural and remote areas as well, not just regional. And I teach skills around identifying warning signs and how you can not only support the person, but you can also look after yourself. Because I think we can sometimes get so lost within that space of wanting to help others that we forget about helping ourselves. And one of the things you mentioned, Chantel, before was that feeling of having to drag people you know, within the Indigenous people, at, you know, as you said, what, 0.2 or something % of Indigenous people are thriving. And, you know, what is thriving? For some people, just being alive and, you know, having a shower in the morning, like that to them is huge. So, you know, so the mental health space and the well-being and the healing space, I really try to look at the person with what they're going through and think, okay, if I can just support them within that space right now, and if that just means that, hey, today I'm going to get up and I'm, you know, gonna shower and have something to eat, you know, that's what it is. And hopefully they can get through that and they can heal, or, you know, deal with what's going on. And then they get to the point where they're thriving and they're attending school, or they've got gainful employment, because, as you know, our history is full of trauma, and not everyone has the skills or their environment to be able to be nurtured through that space.
Yeah, no, look, I think that's so powerful with what you said, and I really identify with how you've done things, because I'm very similar in terms of we get faced by challenges that are completely outside of our control. One of my things was that I didn't want to be a teen mum. Like I'd been told at school that, because I'm the third eldest of 18 siblings, of which I only just found out at Christmas time, sitting with my older brother, that my mum had actually had a son before him. And now being 36, I have really started to delve into my mum's story. So I lost my mum when I was 20. And I wasn't raised by my mum because I was actually sexually abused by a family member. And it was in my mum's family that they decided to protect him as opposed to protecting me. And I'm just very grateful that I was lucky enough. I had a very loving father who tried to do the best he could, even though he himself also had his issues. Both my parents were highly dysfunctional, but now understanding what I know about trauma and having been determined to break the cycle, not just for myself, but I didn't want my kids to grow up the way I did, with not having any options and people saying this is the best it's going to be, like this is all you have in front of you. But now really understanding and making space to try and understand my parents' journey. They did the best they could with what they had. Like, I was lucky enough that I at least had love. I never had to question whether I was loved. And I had my grandmother, my father's mother, who was she was a mechanic during the war. So she was pretty much the staunchest person I know. She raised her kids, and then she raised her grandkids as well. And sometimes it's about just looking at your current situation and going, well, this is shit. This is what it is. I can't change it. But what can I do within myself, and what choices can I make to take that next step, so that this doesn't, where I am now, doesn't determine where I either stay or who I become. And I remember an incident, because we were at school together when you were pregnant with Harmony, and I've always been the type of person, you've always been very much focused on yourself and who you want to become. So you've never really let other people's opinions bother you. You kind of just like that beautiful swan that's just floating along and no one sees your feet churning underneath the water. Whereas I'm like the bloody bird that's trying to learn how to fly, and everyone sees my struggles, and I'm very confrontational in that, and I stand my ground quite vocally. But I remember this one day at school, we're at a school that had no school uniform. So girls had titties hanging out, they had ass cheeks hanging out, as you do when you're a teen girl, like, and you're finding your womanhood. We had everything from the tomboys to the girls that were covered up to the girls who were just comfortable in their bodies. And I remember, and this teacher stopped you because you had a t-shirt on, and like the bottom half of your pregnant belly was hanging out, and she came over to us and she's like, Bianca, I think you need to dress a little bit more appropriately for school. And you kind of just went to brush it off, whereas I went, like I could feel the energy coming out of me. And I said, excuse me, miss, but two girls just walked past you. One had her ass cheeks hanging out and another had her titties hanging out, and you said nothing. But because my cousin's pregnant and here trying to get an education, you choose to call her out. And like you said, you had Harmony, and then 2 weeks later, you were there, you sat your exams, like you refused to let anything stop you. And I think that, and that was just another chapter in your journey. Like you're now studying psychology, and you've got more children now. You're a single mum of your children and your family, and you're working. You've got, well, I wanted to let you say that because I know that, but I also know that that's just a part of your journey that you've just really started opening up about now, because for a long time you were really protective of not letting people know a lot about your private life and your children. But now you've really started to open up and share. And I think, like, it's absolutely phenomenal what you've been through, but the fact that you're still kind of striving, because a lot of women our age that are in the more mainstream or middle class, they've got their career set. They're either CEOs or on the pathway to being CEOs, whereas you and I are kind of at that stage where we're like, we know where we want to go, but we've still got steps in place to kind of to get there. We're still in the building phase of our careers, and I think it's taken a lot for me to kind of become comfortable with what I know and what I don't know. How have you kind of managed that space?
Well, you hit the nail on the head when you talked about how you recognized that I wasn't going to call out that behavior. And one of the reasons I didn't call out that behavior was my fear that, I could be removed from school, and, I'm just that gratefulness of just being allowed to be in school, because I was aware that, not everyone was given that opportunity. So I was trying to, and I've done this probably throughout life, trying in that way of, yes, being a leader, but not rocking the boat too much. Like teen pregnancy, I was like, hey, have I rocked the boat enough? But, not, and so, having people like you, hearing that and, calling that behavior out as well, and, just stopping me and going, be like, I know you're hearing this, but you should be proud of yourself. And, around sharing my story again and how many children I have, that fear of two things. So as a woman within the workplace, we're actually, especially a mum within the workplace, we are highly discriminated within that space. So we deal with things like, how are you going to look after the kids and work? How are you going, what if your kids are sick and you can't show up to work? So that we're already walking into a stereotypical idea of, what a mum is like within the workplace. And it's not true. Like, mums work extremely hard to, not only keep a roof over their kids' head, because we live in a world where two parents need to provide for their children. Well, we hope in our world, that isn't always the reality, but, it's no longer the part where mum stays at home and dad goes and works. It's, both parents are trying to do the best they can to provide for their children. So I think there's been fear sometimes with sharing about my private life, and I'm happy to share that I've got children, but sometimes I have stopped myself in regards to sharing how many children I have. And maybe that is because fear of judgment, or that impacting me, or having to explain how I do it sometimes. And I know I'm still working through this, and in the last few years, I've been able to start opening up more and, sharing my journey, sharing how many children I have and what that looks like for me. One of the things when we're dealing with this global pandemic is I put a post up on my LinkedIn, which is a workspace, and I called out how many children I had and that I was a single mum, and that, what I'm doing in this space. And Chantel, that's big for me to do that within my workspace. Privately, if you know me, you will hear part of my story, and you mentioned about mum, your mum, and I know some of that story as well, not just from what my mum tells me, but also from growing up with you too, and seeing your side of it, and that fracture within that relationship with the family as well. And my mum was part of Stolen Generation, and she was the eldest of her siblings. And she wasn't allowed to grow up with her siblings because they were worried that she would share about her their parents, because she remembered them. And she's an amazing, strong woman, and she's had to deal with trauma and that worry of having her children taken away because of what she went through due to white policy. And now she uses that to foster and adopt, and she is very passionate about keeping siblings together. And I think over time, I've just started being like, look, I'm owning my story in its full capacity, and you're either going to accept me. You might have questions, feel free to ask. I am someone that, as you mentioned, like, I won't bite. Like, I actually appreciate when people bring it up and give me the opportunity to show you or to share some of that. My children, I'm extremely lucky with my children, and they don't get in trouble at school, and they appreciate their education. And
you're not lucky, you've done the work. No parent is lucky. Like, we get gifted these children who come with their own personalities, but it's also on us to provide the environment that can nurture and support that growth of that individual. And you've led the way. Like, you have never stopped working. You own property. Like, you're now getting an education. Your two eldest have finished year 12, and you've got the next lot coming through, and now you're a single mum as well, and you're managing that. You volunteer at 2 places. You manage multiple part-time jobs, working remotely whilst also managing your children, and you're still studying part-time. Like, I mean, that's credit, because as we both know, children don't do what you say, they do what you do.
Yeah, look, it is true. And again, that's a really perfect example of, you being part of my squad, and, and that's part of your warrior too. You're like, own this, and I'm putting it on the table, and I'm sharing what you're doing, because you're only giving a snippet, and, and it is, again, like, and I'm lucky to have the support system that I do, like within you and within others, that turn around and they kind of, sometimes they nurture me. You're kind of the one that goes, nah, B, this is what you're doing, share it, and I know there are times where you're really sensitive about, okay, what do I give her the time to share, and then other times you're like, nah, you're not getting away with it. And I've got other people that have done that as well, and they've, asked if I would speak, and, and I was part of the Illawarra International Women's Day panel this year, and I've been a keynote speaker within the university. So I'm studying psychology and criminology. So my passion is around that intergenerational trauma, helping young people and before they enter the criminal justice system, and also around that domestic violence and suicide. And the thing is, a lot of it's interwoven. So, it sounds like a lot, but this is what we're dealing with on the front lines. And, I think maybe my work within the home and community care sector, and even the aged care sector as well, allowed me to see the multifaceted issues that people are dealing with, not just within their own lives, but within their family and their community. And, even, as you said, even the government and the policies that we're dealing with throughout our lives. Like right now, there is a strength within our communities of us coming together and trying to fight this global pandemic. And I'm feeling that. And it comes off of floods, droughts, and bushfires, let alone, we're still people are still dying of suicide, and we're still dealing with high mental health. And, so I'm feeling a strength, and within that space, I'm grateful that, people are coming together, and we're all trying to help one another. And, that's maybe staying at home, or, being that support for them essential workers, or, being innovative and using, platforms like this, and, working from the, bedroom, these are the things that, these are the things and the times that can test us, but they build on our character. And, you mentioned earlier, that, you're going through all these different changes, but, I've seen you change over the years, and even grow up, and move into that space as a mother. And and as a mother, it's challenging because you never just stay in one space. You've got to work with where they're at, and all the all the different ages, and let alone at being a working mum, and our own journeys too. We as Indigenous women feel like we have to pull people with us, let alone lead. And well, it is our responsibility to support our community and help empower them. All right, I'm not a fan of pulling people. I'm here. I'm happy to support you. I will do what I can within my space, but I won't be pulling you, because, mate, you got the strength to be up here. All right, or you choose what you want. So I'm all about that self-determination, and if I can do my part and help you, I will. I will jump in there and give you a hand, but you need to be part of that, because, look, my children, one of the reasons I can parent and I can do everything I'm doing is because I'm teaching my children to be adults. We're going through homeschooling at the moment. So I was homeschooling them for 3 weeks before they went to their dad's house. And, I've got 3 kids that are in high school now. My 2 eldest have finished their schooling. And hopefully they'll go to uni in the future. Well, they will, but I don't know what that looks like. But, I've got 3 that are in high school, and, they've been using, like, we're in the 21st century. We have access to technology. If this was to happen, prior to the internet, you can complain about that, like, we have a lot of access here and a lot of opportunities to look at our environment and our space and adapt to it, and, see new ways to deliver what we want and to help people. So my children, my 3 teenagers, they have Google Classroom. They've been using Google Classroom through their high school for a while. So this isn't new for, the government education system. So now it's just they're not having as much face-to-face. So they know that they've got assessments. They know when they've got to sit up on that Google Classroom or jump on another platform to see their teachers and say that they're there. And they know when assessments are due. And I hold them to that responsibility. I don't do it for them, but they know. And look, I will support them and I will help them along the way, but I'm not going to sit there and hold your hand and helicopter parent. I'm teaching you to be an adult. And if you can adapt to this situation, it's going to be easier when you start going into the world. When you're dealing with other things out in the world, and they're like, hey, you can't work from the office. You're going to have to do it from home. Well, the skills that my kids are learning right now, and kids all over Australia, is going to help them within that space in the future when they go out into the world. So things like that. That's the kind of attitude I have in regards to my own children and community.
Look, I'll be completely honest. I've always been the type of person, I love nurturing people. I'm a very loving person, and I was born to be a mum. Like, I'm a very hands-on mum, very protective and all that stuff. And I've realized that I'm not the right person to work with people that are still stuck in that victim mentality, that sense of entitlement, and lack of gratitude really grinds my bones when people have a sense of entitlement and a lack of gratitude. And for me, in my own journey, it's always been around, first, I need to prove that it can be done, because growing up, like, we were always told this is as good as it's going to get, or you face the different stereotypes. Like, not only did we face stereotypes about being mums, but we're also fair-skinned Aboriginal women, so you've got to justify on both sides. You've got to deal with lateral violence, you've got to deal with the questions of all the looks of how can you kind of be Aboriginal. And I know with myself, like whenever I've set a goal or a dream and I start sharing that with people, because as much as I say to myself, you know what, I'm not going to say anything, I'm just going to keep it to myself. It's not me. I'll tell everyone and anyone that wants to listen. But people look at me and they're like, oh, how can you achieve that? Or who are you to dream those things? And what I've had to realize is that when you're doing something that hasn't been done before, particularly in your own circles, people don't understand and it scares people. And you also make other people feel uncomfortable when you're the type of person to go after what you want. But what really drives me now that I'm starting to understand myself more, because a lot of what I've done has always been done on autopilot. It's been done because I had no other choice. I was put in a situation and my two options were to accept it or to do something about it. And I've always been the type of person, for a while I'll accept it and then I start getting this feeling of this is not where I'm supposed to be, and I'll get up and do something about it. Like I failed year 12, I had to repeat, I had to switch schools. It took me 10 years to finish my degree. I had severe postnatal depression after the birth of my twins. But I've always, when I've been knocked down, I've always realized that I'm looking up. I'm not face down. I'm not dead in the ground. And if you're looking up, you can get up. And it's always been because I've had someone else to fight for. Whenever I try to do something for myself, it doesn't work out. Like I don't have the drive. But when I know it's for my kids or for my community, or like you said, when I hear you not giving yourself the value and the respect and the power of what you actually do in a day, I really want to kind of draw that out. And sometimes I'm a little bit more forceful than other people. I'm like, nah, come here, I'll drag you with me. But I also agree with you around self-determination. I won't do for other people what I know they can do for themselves, but rather what I want to do is provide the example, set the example that can be done through my own story, and provide that evidence base and that credibility, but then provide a safe space. Like you said, it's about nurturing and supporting, but I won't do it for you because we can't. It's not possible.
And, my first time that I had to deal with someone questioning my Aboriginality was a teacher when I was in year 2.
Yeah.
I have, my pop, he's non-Indigenous, but he lost his children too because he fell in love and had children to an Indigenous woman. And, he wasn't able to raise, my mum and his other children. And he was a non-Indigenous man. So, when my mum has one of the better stories, as in we being reconnected with her siblings, bar one, because she passed away. But, by the time she was reconnected with Nen had a stroke and was in a wheelchair, so she couldn't communicate, so she couldn't heal and have them conversations with her mum that, was really needed. And, so when my mum reconnected with my pop, and he was an advocate, and he was of owning our Indigenous side and being proud of that. And, he has helped the Indigenous communities, his community, because he was accepted within that community as well, for as long as I can remember. So, I think I'm lucky to have people like you, and, I am independent, and some people don't know what I'm doing, and, sometimes it's too exhausting to be like, okay, I'm going through this, I'm doing this, I'm doing that, or sometimes I don't even recognize it. I'm like, oh yeah, I am doing that, aren't I? Or, because at this moment, I'm here, I'm in the present, I'm enjoying, chatting to my sister, and, deadly painting behind you, by the way, too.
Actually, that was done by your niece. That's Nacinta's first kind of painting, and she did it for me for my birthday.
Yeah, no, it's amazing. So, and plus on top of that, like, I don't know any different. Like, even though, I talk about my own educational journey and how, changing that intergenerational pregnancy and, just trying to give my children the best life possible. I've been a parent since I was 14. Everything I do has an impact on my children and the community. Like, we are all interconnected, so, I'm that, you know, you've come along on my journey just as much as I've come along on yours. And even though, you know, we don't live, you know, 5 minutes apart, we've always checked in on one another.
Yeah.
You know, you're someone that, you know, and especially when you're a strong Indigenous woman, you're trying to raise your children, you're trying to do life. There are them times where we are vulnerable and people don't recognize that. And there is that fear and even sometimes trauma and concern of, you know, is all the stuff that I'm doing going to give my children the best platform and the best opportunities and, you know, change that generational, even that financial side as well, because it is important that we have financial stability, that we have a roof over our heads. One of the reasons that I got a home within my 20s was because I had to, for one, I had 5 kids, and, you know, I had been using salary sacrifice as a way to build a savings account. And I had to keep, I had this anxiety that, you know, I'd get kicked out of home, or, you know, someone could easily just pull the rug out from under me and my family and we wouldn't have a roof over our head. And that was my driving force to get a home for us and to give my children that kind of stability. And I still worry about that to this day, especially being a single mum with 7 children and in the current situation that we're dealing with, the global pandemic. You know, will I have a roof over my head? What does that look like within that space? So these are the things that, you know, I carry with me, and I normally don't share with people outside of, you know, my, you know, like, I don't, like, normally you're the one that I'll be telling this to. I'll be sharing that side of, you know, my vulnerability and the things that I do worry about. So
how do you manage I like to call it, how do you manage the shit in your life while still showing up to perform in the areas that matter? Because as you've said, sometimes it's not about where we want to be, it's about dealing with kind of where you're at. But to my knowledge, you've always used your trauma as a platform to push you forward, because you've used it to go, okay, this is where I don't want to be, but you've accepted that that's where you're starting, but you've always taken the steps to kind of get to where you want to get to. So how are you kind of managing, I guess, your fears and anxieties around the current situation while still showing up for your kids and your work, and kind of what's your hopes for once we get through this?
So probably 2 things. Again, one of the things we mentioned earlier was our journey in life teaches us them inner skills and that to be able to deal with crisis. So dealing with, as you say it so eloquently, shit, and then still showing up within my workspace or my friendship space, or even just to be there for other people, because I work with people that are dealing with crisis. So you mentioned earlier about when you fall and you're looking up and you're like, okay, but I'm looking up, you know, I'm not looking down. A lot of people, when they fall, they're looking down, and I try to help them turn over to look up. You know, that's the kind of space that that I sit in, or I'm dealing with people that are dealing with a lot of guilt around people in their community, you know, suiciding and things like that, and what that looks like for them because they are at higher risk and not looking after themselves in that space. So I think I've been dealing with shit, as you say, since I can remember. And school was probably, again, one of my protective factors, me being able to go to school. And, you know, in Broken Hill, I was able to, you know, head out to, you know, country and, you know, run around. And at the outback, I was, you know, that was my space. And, you know, and I had some friends too. And that really helped me remove myself at times from that shit. So, you know, yes, we're going through a tough time. Yes, there's a lot of challenges that we've got to face. I feel that with everything going on, I'm grateful for the position I am in. You know, that could change, you know, but at the same time, I'm trying to just be in the present, do what I can, not just for me and my family, but also for the community. You know, I think about the people that are homeless, that don't have a roof over their head, they've already been dealing with mental health issues, and now they're dealing with this. Now, the average person who is dealing with the stress of this and what that looks like. So, you know, all them vulnerable people within our communities, like that doesn't go away, and now they're dealing with this on top of it. So, you know, you know, everyone's going to be dealing with shit throughout their lives. You know, we live in a first world country, and, you know, I just try to do my best within this space and within, and with the opportunities that I have. And, you know, I'm honest at times, and I think, okay, what have I got to do? You know, what does this look like? Like with the pandemic, like even processing, okay, what's this look like? Am I taking this serious enough? Like everyone went through that journey within weeks of one another. You know, at one point we're like, oh, okay, this is happening. Okay, this is serious. Oh, this isn't just your average flu. Trying to get informed about what that looks like. Oh, should I be pulling the kids out of school? Like, what's the message we're getting? And you mentioned, you know, the government and the message that they're giving to the community. And it is, you know, you could kind of see the journey that they were going through. And, you know, I could see the community trying to work out what that looks like within that space too, and thinking, okay, we need to start making changes and adapting to this and looking at what that looks like for each other. So, you know, and just sometimes take a breath. Oh, and I do self-care still. Like I'm still dealing with stuff, you know, that I, you know, in life that has nothing to do with this global, you know, pandemic. So I give myself self-care as well. You know, and I would share that with people. That's part of probably what I do too on my other platforms, because it's okay to look after you. Yeah. You know, it's, yeah, and it's actually it's important that you're looking after you within this space.
No, look, thank you so much. There's so much gold there, and I think thank you for your courage in being so open to share what I know you wouldn't usually share with anyone else. And I guess that's the privilege of being a sister. I can kind of push those edges, but yeah. I think as we progress on our journey and whatnot, it's really important to be able to own, like you said, own the shit, but also look at what you can do, what are the opportunities, and also that self-care space. What would be one thing that you would kind of leave people with? Like if they're struggling to find their warrior within, or they're really struggling in this current space and time, what would be one or two tips that you would really like to leave people with?
So as an Indigenous woman, and also, you know, just even within the space that I'm in, connection is important. So, you know, reach out to people or reach out to services, whatever that looks like, you know, and whether that's for, you know, health or well-being, or just even social, you know, use platforms that are available, and, you know, check in on people, you know, and check in on yourself as well.
No, look, thank you so much. I'm really, really grateful to have had this opportunity, and yeah, I look forward to being able to share this with people. And if people want to follow you or connect with you, like, are you happy with people to follow you or connect with you through LinkedIn or other social platforms?
So LinkedIn would probably be the best one. So Bianca Hunt. But, you know, on Facebook, I probably share a bit more about my family stuff. So if you're looking at that professional side, LinkedIn would be the space to do that. And as we build that connection, might move to Facebook.
Yeah, exactly. But no, look, thank you, sis, because I know you're a very private person, but I also think it's just amazing for people to be able to see what is possible, because you're used to managing this sort of stuff and like managing different roles all at the same time. And I think if people can see evidence that other people can do it and manage it well while still being vulnerable enough to say, I don't get it right all the time, we can kind of start to create an evidence base for people to draw upon. And we're both normal everyday people. I mean, our journeys have taken very different kind of paths, but we've stayed connected, and they're very much, we support each other. And like you said, that support is really, really important. But we also are very honest with each other as well, that sisterhood is always about telling each other the truth and pulling each other up when probably the cause of our own problems, or we're digging our own holes. I know you're always one to go, hey, have you checked in on this, or don't be so hard on yourself and stuff like that. So I really want to say thank you for being such a warrior, and for being courageous and trusting us and sharing your story. Have so much love and respect for you, B.
Same goes to you, sis, and thank you for bringing me into this space as well. I appreciate it.
No worries.